Wednesday, word. Wednesday, word. Wednesday, word. And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you should know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Before I jump straight into it, I just realized I didn't turn my studio light on. And I already know it's dead. So I need to get in here and plug it up and then turn it on. My apologies. 3, 2, 1. Light. There we go. All right. So we're live with the studio light. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me on the first row today. As always on Wednesdays, I like to do a Wednesday word. And let's jump straight into tonight's topic. Tonight's topic for the Wednesday word is dividing fractions. I always like to explain what I mean by my topic. And sometimes my topics are a little more cryptic than others. This time it's a little more cryptic than others if you're not into math like I am into math. So the topic dividing fractions is really about how when you divide literally a fraction mathematically, the way you divide it is by turning it into a multiplication problem, and you reciprocate or you provide a reciprocal of that fraction and multiply it across to get your solution. And so when I'm talking about dividing fractions, though I'm saying that from the reciprocation standpoint, what I'm really talking about is relationships, how it's important to both give what you receive in relationships and also give what you want to receive in relationships. So tonight, as we talk about dividing fractions, I'm going to share 3 tools with the first row on this topic and how I go about dividing fractions or strengthening and reciprocating relationships. So let's jump straight into it. Tool number 1 when it comes to dividing fractions is don't let giving what you receive change who you are. And as always, I try to start with like the most potent tool or impotent, depending on what you say, but important tool when I'm dealing with a topic, and really not giving what you receive, not allowing what you receive to change who you are inherently is such an important tool when it comes to reciprocation. Now, I will tell you, I have been, my wife will tell you, she's like, oh, you're so petty sometimes. I've been known to be petty sometimes, and like almost sometimes to my own detriment. But really the importance of this tool is about truly being true to your authentic identity, who you are. So let's say someone has wronged you. Somebody did something that made you mad or wronged you in some kind of way. And your response is I'm going to get back at them. If that's not who you are, if the actions that it would take for you to get back at them is not who you are authentically, it's probably the worst thing you can do to reciprocate an action out of something or an action to someone based on an action that they gave to you. Or to reciprocate an action to someone simply out of spite, out of frustration. Well, you said this or you did this, so now I'm saying this and I'm doing the same thing that you're doing. So now see, we're matchy because we're reciprocating. Well, the problem with that is when you pull yourself out of your authentic identity to reciprocate something that is not truly, it comes from within you, but it's not authentic to who you truly are. Or maybe it is authentic to who you are, but it's not authentic to who you want to be. You actually cause more damage to yourself than you do the person you're trying to get back at or you're trying to get even at. You actually don't get even, you get further uneven, we'll call it, because I can't remember the disparity word, but you get further uneven from what you're actually trying to accomplish. And so I used to, I don't remember, I've been in Utah for almost 5 years now, but a couple years before I moved from California to Utah, I used to hold these mastermind conversations, and they were just a monthly conversation that I would have with a small group of people. We pick a topic, we discuss it deeply. Most of us would, well, I believe all of us would pretty much grow from that conversation, and we take our takeaways. See you guys next month. Well, one of the things that came up in that mastermind, and it's a rule that I've lived by. It's a rule that a couple people who have been in that mastermind continue to live by and continue to resonate with them, is only give what you are willing to give. And I've always only thought about that as like, I'm only going to give money that I'm willing to give. I'm only going to give time that I'm willing to give. I'm only going to give positive things that I'm willing to give. But really, there's a negative side to it. Sometimes we give negatively. Sometimes we give negative energy. Sometimes we give negative thoughts, negative actions. And sometimes we give time to negative sources or to negative experiences. And so I started thinking about what happens when I give something that I don't want to give, but I'm giving it out of frustration. And I go back to the positive. If I give money out of something that I don't want to give, but I'm just giving it because I'm supposed to give it, or I feel like I'm gonna give it, or want to give it, or whatever. Um, and then all of a sudden, let's say the money's not returned to me, or the person isn't really grateful. All of a sudden, because I've given something that I really didn't want to give, wasn't in my heart to give, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm angry, and then I become spiteful. Whereas you can do the same thing with bad things. You can say, okay, well, this person cut me off. Now I'm going to give you the cuss out because you cut me off. So I'm going to cuss you out. It's not who I want to be. It's not necessarily what I even want to give, but I'm reciprocating this energy, and I'm allowing that reciprocal energy, whether they meant to offend me or not, I'm allowing that reciprocal energy to change who I am. And that's why I say it's probably one of the worst things that you can do, is because it pulls you out of who you are. And typically, when you are pulled out of who you are, eventually, maybe not in the moment, maybe in the moment, cussing the person out on the road feels good. Ha! I got that off my chest. I feel great. Maybe it feels good in the moment. However, at some point, you're going to look back at that moment in your day, maybe in the evening, maybe a couple of years from now, whatever it may be, and you're going to be left with this sense of unhappiness. And that unhappiness comes from a place of, really, you've betrayed your true identity. You've betrayed who you are, who you want to be for a moment. And so tool number one is really about being true to your identity, being true to your authentic identity, being true to your identity that you aspire to. So that way, when you come to a place of reciprocation, or after the reflection on what you've reciprocated, you're not left in this space where there's frustration. You're not left in this space where there's regret because of the fact that you weren't true to who you were. So that's tool number one. What's going on, Brother Bruce? Let's jump in. Tool number two. And this actually kind of sets up, tool number one kind of sets up tool number two. But tool number two, when it comes to dividing fractions, is permit yourself to disconnect. Man, how many times have you heard that little voice in your head just say, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And then you don't. And now because you didn't, because you feel some toxic obligation to, I have to stay connected, I have to stay in the fight, because you feel that toxic obligation. Now all of a sudden you're in this spiral, and the spiral may not even be with the person that initiated that spiral, which is really you, but we're not going to say that out loud. But the person that you were interacting with that initiated that spiral begins to impact other relationships. And so permitting yourself to disconnect, what it allows you to do is it allows you to sever that cycle of, I trigger you, you trigger me. I trigger you, you trigger me. I trigger you, you trigger me. Yeah, that's reciprocal. You're giving what you're getting, and you're getting what you're giving. However, by disconnecting, not necessarily forever, but disconnecting for a moment, will allow you to sever that cycle, and it allows you to make better choices. Now, what happens when we don't disconnect is we go from having the option to make choices, like make the better choice, to being forced to make a choice. And sometimes the choice that you're forced to make, both choices, if you have one or two choices to make, both choices are not good choices. And so permitting yourself to disconnect, it gives you space, it gives the other person space, or the relationship space, and then it allows you to kind of come back together if that is what you desire. Not always will you come back together, but it allows you to come back together if that's what your desire is, in a space where you can actually reciprocate yourself from that authentic space, not being changed because of frustration or from the, I don't know, the irritation that cycle has. And then also, by permitting yourself to disconnect, what you're doing is you're actually respecting your need for space. And some things can't be solved in close quarters. People will tell you, I am an advocate of therapy. whenever I feel like I'm overwhelmed, you can almost guarantee that I'm going to figure out what therapist I can go to talk about my feelings, to talk about my emotions, to talk about my frustrations, to talk about some of the communication struggles I may be having. Those are the things that I'm going to do, because at some point, maybe the relationship that I'm trying to either mend or fix or engage with, maybe being close is not the right answer, because there's so much triggering going on. So having a place that you can go to create that space to disconnect from the turmoil, to disconnect from the frustration, and move into a space where you can have a conversation around the relationship, but not with the relationship. What that does is it just gives you that ability to then be able to make clearer, more pragmatic choices. And hopefully, if you've taken the time to create the disconnect or create the space initially with enough, I'm sorry, hopefully, if you've taken the time to create the disconnect before it's too late and things are already exploded into oblivion, then what you're able to do is to come back to that situation refreshed, with a clear mind, and hopefully with some solutions on how to reciprocate who you want to be in that relationship. Or you come back to that relationship and you realize, hey, this is a relationship that I need to disconnect from, because the only thing that I can see me reciprocating to you is not who I want to be. That's tool number 2. Permit yourself to disconnect. You're not a failure because you're not a failure because you choose to disconnect. And I don't know, sticking there into the fight just for the old fight's sake doesn't seem to make sense. That's one thing you'll notice about fighters, professional fighters. If a professional fighter gets knocked down, and I've seen this in tons of boxing matches, where a professional fighter will get knocked down and they're hurt, and they could get back up, they could stand back up and continue the fight. But because they're hurt to the point where they know that it's not going to be advantageous to them to continue to just fight and brawl it out, they stay down until the ref counts to 10, and then they stand up. And they're better off taking that TKO, or I don't know if it's a TKO. Don't get me into boxing terminology, but we'll say they're better off taking that TKO or that KO and standing up versus getting back up ill prepared, not with the right set of tools to get into that fight and get knocked out and or worse, injured. That is why permitting yourself to disconnect, even from a professional fighting standpoint, relationships sometimes have fights, conflicts, and stresses. That's why it's important to allow yourself or permit yourself to disconnect. And then tool number 3, when it comes to dividing fractions, is make new choices. Man, you are not. I'm a pretty stubborn person. I would just tell you, my wife will tell you, a lot of people who know me will tell you I'm a stubborn person. However, it is okay to make new choices. And really, when I say make new choices, what I also mean is don't fear making new decisions. Sometimes it's been like, that's the way it was, that's the way it is, that's the way it always will be. And that's how we operate in our life sometimes. But that lack of flexibility or pliability in number one, as a mindset in life in general, but in relationships, is really dangerous, because you might find yourself, hey, what's going on, casual? Yes, 10 counts, TKO. Thank you. It's really dangerous in relationships, because relationships are very fluid. And if you're not fluid with them, it's hard to move with the ebbs and flow of the relationship. If you're very rigid, imagine being on a piece of wood in the middle of an ocean that's wavy. That piece of wood is rigid. It's not designed to bend and flex with the waves. So eventually that wood is going to break. It's going to snap. And that's how, when you have a stubborn mindset, and you're unwilling to make new choices, not that you have to make a new choice, at least look at the opportunity to make a new choice, I guess I should say. You get into these relationships that have this fluidity in them, and then eventually something breaks. Either them, or both, or the relationship. But something eventually breaks because of the unwillingness to make new choices. And it's funny that we would think that there's so many things in our life that are not permanent, that once we say something in a relationship, that it has to be permanent. You can make new choices in each and every interaction. There have been times where I've had very, very good friends who have needed me to show up. Hey, I'll show up. I'm there. I try to take care of the business that we need to take care of, and then I'm gone. There have been other times where that same friend may call me and say, hey, I really need you. And I'm like, hey, I would love to be there. I can't be. Or, hey, right now I'm dealing with my own stuff and I can't be. So I wouldn't love to be there because I'm already dealing with my own stuff. There's been times where I've had to make that choice, but I'm always willing to make the choice that goes back to tool number one, that resonates with who I authentically want to be. And then lastly, about when it comes to making new choices, when necessary, please, please, please do not be too stubborn to change your approach. People get a reputation. I say this from my own personal experiences. Um, People get a reputation based on their interactions with people. Sometimes that's a good reputation, sometimes that's a bad reputation. But the only way we can truly change our reputation is through our interactions. And if our interactions with people are the same every single time, their perception of who we are is probably not going to change. The only way we can change that is by making new decisions. Now, if the decisions that you're making are working for you, at the end of the day, it's not a popularity contest. You don't have to make new choices or new decisions because of the fact that you want people to see you differently. It's really about who do you want to be, who do you want to be perceived as, and if the actions and the choices that you are choosing are not in alignment with that, then it's time to reassess and look at making some new choices. So that's what I have for you tonight on the Wednesday Word. Really quickly to go over the three tools for dividing fractions. Tool number one is don't let giving what you receive change who you are. Be who you desire to be. If you only get one pass at this whole life thing. So at the end of the day, trying to be somebody else because they made you mad and then not being yourself, that's a waste of your heartbeats. I always call them heartbeats. That's a waste of your heartbeats. So be who you desire to be. Tool number two is permit yourself to disconnect, whether it's temporary or permanently. Take the space that you need, and it's okay to take the space that you need. Don't feel like you're a villain if you're not coming from a place of spite and you're not coming from a place of retaliation. If you need space, take that space. If you don't need space and you're trying to just be a jerk about it, then refer to tool number one. Tool number three, finally, tool number three is make new choices. You can reciprocate differently each and every time. The relationship was meant to be fluid, so allow for that pliability to take place in the relationship. As always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story, something that kind of got me thinking about this topic. And I have a lot of conversations that get me thinking about relationships, but something specifically this towards the end of last year took place that really got me thinking about the topic. And so I started thinking about this topic as lost, found, and thriving. And I reflected back to a moment in my life when I was pretty much lost. I was lost on who I was, lost on where I was going, what I wanted to do. And this is probably about almost 20 years ago. And I was in a I had a relationship, not in a relationship, had a relationship with a person who I felt offended by some of the decisions they made in the relationship. And because I felt offended by the relationship, the decisions that I felt they were making in the relationship, I chose to reciprocate negative energy. I was just like, oh, as my wife would say, oh, is this what we're doing? Is this what we're doing? No problem. Negative energy gets negative energy. And what I what I experienced because I chose to reciprocate the negative energy as well was I was set back financially. I was set back emotionally. I was set back physically. All because I decided to reciprocate somebody who I never really wanted to be versus disconnecting from the person or the relationship that was in place, disconnecting that relationship and saying, hey, maybe I need a timeout. And I probably would have stepped to the side and said, no, I don't need a timeout. I just need this to not be a relationship that's involved in my life. And I've made that decision to disconnect from relationships multiple times since then, never really being clear that, oh, I learned a very valuable lesson when I didn't disconnect from the relationship the first time, and what that cost, and really being clear on not wanting to pay those costs again. And so what I what I what I initially did was I was pulling away from my authentic self, whether it was out of anger, out of frustration, out of spite. But again, it came at a great cost to me. And then after all of that cost, all is said and done, the outcome was what? The relationship dissolved, and I was no longer engaged with that person, and they were no longer engaged with me. And then I had a new opportunity, like I said, towards the end of last year, I had a new opportunity where this person kind of hit my radar. Now I haven't thought about this person for a long time, but they hit my radar. And somebody brought something that they had said to my attention. And I was just kind of like, hmm. I thought about like, do I want to say something? Do I want to retaliate? Do I want to do anything? And really, it was about making a new choice. And this is why I say tool number three is really important, making new choices. Because if I'm unwilling to make new choices, then I pull myself right back into the turmoil that that relationship was causing in my life 20 years ago. And because I'm willing to make new choices, I'm able to say, nah, I just want to stay disconnected. I'm going to permit myself to remain disconnected from this relationship. Anything that they say, whether it's against me, for me, or whatever, I'm really indifferent to. And I'm not going to allow myself to change the trajectory of how long, especially how long it's taken me to get to the trajectory of who I'm changing to become or evolving to become. I'm not going to allow myself to devolve back to something that was 19, 20 years ago. And so I allowed myself to simply make a new choice and say, hey, that negative energy that I was willing to uh, reciprocate in 2024, that energy I was willing to reciprocate, I'm not willing to reciprocate that energy to you in 2023. Sorry, I'm lost on what years we're in now, but I'm not willing to reciprocate that energy in 2023. And in doing so, what I did is I don't know the outcome for them because I didn't re-engage with them. However, the outcome for me is that the resources, the energy, the time, the effort that I would have placed in reciprocating negative energy is now placed me in a space where I can actually use that same energy, because you're going to spend the energy one way or the other, for much more positive things that impact my life, my family, my health in a much greater way. So that's really what tonight dividing fractions is about figuring out if I'm going to reciprocate something and I'm going to multiply the energy back into something, then I want to make sure that I'm doing that with something that allows me to be who I want to be, something that allows me to have the space that I need to have, and something that allows me to evolve and make new and better choices along the road. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. I thank you so much for tuning in live. As always, this is not the end for this week. I don't know if you guys know, maybe you caught it last week, maybe you didn't catch it last week, but we do have Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe back live on Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. What is that? 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then also, Carolyn Michelle's podcast, The Grind to Find, has been moved to Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have nothing else other than Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live this week, but you can always find a thought of the day on LinkedIn, Facebook, not on YouTube, but Instagram. You can find the thoughts of the day there. And you can also see what's coming up or what's coming new with the first row. Other than that, that's all I have for you guys this evening. As always, if you like this video, please share it. If you share it, please like it. I love engaging with you in the live chat and to say what Casual said. He said, by the way, I was wrong. A 10 count is a KO. So if you get knocked down and you're down for 10 seconds, you got knocked out, but you didn't get necessarily injured, FYI. But anyway, always happy to engage with you if you're watching via the replay up to the first 7 days that the content is out. Because guess what? After 7 days, then it's another Wednesday, word. So other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.